Hi, I'm Kate from dailytarotgirl.com, and today I'm going to be talking with Ashley Stinson. Ashley is the founder of, or the creator of Energy Archaeology and the Realms of Embodiment. She is a teacher, mentor, and guide for energetic anatomy and living a soul-aligned life. She's also the creator of the Energy Archaeology Oracle Deck, and she is a tarot summer school teacher along with me this year. So welcome, Ashley. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is so nice to get to sit down and talk to another teacher who's created for this course, and also someone who loves and has spent so much time, working with and educating on like tarot. It's wonderful.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you do? Because energy archaeologist has to be like one of the coolest sounding job titles ever.
Yeah, it's obviously something that's evolved. And whenever that kind of dropped in, whenever I was first working with the bones, I was like, there it is. That is what this is called, because like it could not fit more perfectly. But what I do specifically is really a lot of just observing, working with clients, and kind of distilling down what is the pattern that I see in the energetic structure of the body. And so when I first started with that, it was just in the bones. I was working kind of generally in energy work. I had been trained and certified as a Reiki master. That never quite fit right. I didn't quite do things the way that you're taught in that system. And so I kind of shed that title and was really just doing energy work in my own way, trying to figure out what this is, how do I work, how do I see things, and landed in the bones, interestingly enough. And the more clients that I worked with, the more I realized there was a pattern to what was coming forward. So with each session, we would be working with what bone was showing up. What did it look like? Was it kind of coming up as a metaphor? Was it coming up like missing? Was it showing up at all? Did it look like it was rotten? Like all these things were kind of speaking in a really interesting way through the bones. And what I came down to was the pattern underlying all of these things was always the same. It didn't matter what the bone looked like. It was always communicating kind of about the same general type of information. So if it was in the shoulder blades, it was always communicating inner child stuff. Like if it looked like it was locked down, we were working with something that was really heavily guarded with the inner child. If it looked like it was porous, we were working with an inner child who, had possibly been taught to have very leaky boundaries or to not have boundaries. So there was always a theme. And the more I observed and the more I witnessed that pattern, it kind of started to codify into a framework, so that whenever I would look at someone, I could almost get an immediate snapshot of, these are the things that are coming up, these are the things that aren't. And it was really just my language, or the body reflecting a language I could read, the energy reflecting it. As I continued to work, I realized that it wasn't just the bones that were speaking. I was beginning to work through muscles, and I was working with the fluid body, and I was working with the organs and in the nervous system. And I started to just refer to those as the realms of embodiment. There's 6 of them, and we're working in all of them all the time, but they each have their own story to tell. They each have their own way that they move energy in our body. And whenever we can, what I like to call like disentangle them, so that the foundational stuff in your bones is healed and solid and whole and like working really holistically in the bone, that part of your embodiment, it's like it solidifies, it kind of comes into its own in a really interesting way. When the muscles disentangle from that, then your like connection and attachment and how you work with resources shifts and changes kind of in your external life. When we disentangle the nervous system from the bones, we work a lot with like fight or flight and how that's showing up. So it's really working with all of it holistically, and also helping each piece to kind of sort out into its own space so that it can support you the best. Yeah.
Okay, I love it. I have questions.
Yes, please.
So I want to say, yeah, okay, so I'll ask my first question, which is, how exactly do you work with people? Are you always working with them in person? Do you do online stuff? Like, how do you work with people?
Yeah, so I actually never worked with people in person. Aside from doing practice sessions whenever I was first learning, I am extremely clairsentient as I have done my own work that has actually resolved a lot. But early on, I would feel everything that person was feeling, and it made it very difficult to be like a clear channel and to actually help and to work with and resolve. And I found that doing sessions on Zoom and distance was a really great way for me to be able to tune in without like taking on or feeling specifically within myself. I still do, but to a much lesser extent. So it kind of became my de facto way of working. So whenever everything happened and like the world shut down and a lot of people moved online, I was already there. It was how I had worked for, many years prior to that. And so it really wasn't a huge change to how I was already seeing clients. But I do actually see less one-on-one clients now, and I do more group work. Mainly because of being able to see like the patterns and the underlying structure and like systematically how we can work with these things. I can support a lot more people and have it kind of integrate in a unique way with each person as opposed to kind of working one-on-one. I still do that, but it's at a much smaller capacity than I used to.
Okay, and so how do you work with groups?
So an example of this right now, I'm running a group program and it's based in the muscles. I've done something similar a couple years ago where I did one in the bones. And what I've done is put forth basically like some teaching videos, some education. We have a conversation about stuff about what it is that each part of the muscle realm is working with. So your tendons and ligaments are kind of how the foundational energy moves from the bones up into the muscle. And they also have a lot to do with like attachment theory type stuff. Are they securely attached? Can the energy move freely into the muscle? Are you almost like resisting it a little bit? Does it move really quickly because it doesn't trust that more energy is coming? There's like really, really cool nuance and intricacies to all of this stuff. But in the very first week, what we do is we gather as a group online on Zoom. And I do a healing session, very much like if it was one-on-one, but for the group, for just the tendons and the ligaments. And we work with that very small piece. They integrate for a week. We come back a week later, and then we work with the stabilizing muscles. So how, once the energy moves in, once we're attached to it, how do we hold it? How are we able to hold something? What's our capacity for holding and working with something? Then we move into, another piece and another piece. And so instead of maybe doing this in like one session or two sessions privately, we have a really lovely extended container that we work in over the course of like 8 weeks. And it gives a lot of space for integration, time for Q&A. We have more like of a group holding where they get to know one another and like you work with what it is that's coming up in a really deep way. And you also get a whole lot more FaceTime with me. It's one of my favorite ways to work
Nice.
because I can go into the nuance. If I'm just doing this in like a quick one-off session, like you're not going to really understand what happened, but it'll happen.
Right.
In the group container, we can really talk about the why and the how and kind of break it down and really slow it down. And I found that it also really helps for the work to last and for it to integrate and for you to embody what the shift is.
I think it's so interesting what you said about how you started to notice certain patterns. And when many years ago, I worked in a rehab facility for people that had addictions. And I worked as a yoga instructor and personal trainer there. And what I started to notice, and I was at the very beginning of my career as a personal trainer. So this was my first job after, doing all my certification and training and everything. So I had no experience prior to this. And I started working in this rehab place. And what I noticed right away is that everybody there, like 90% of the people there had lower back issues. and everyone had lower back issues. And I just thought, oh, wow, I guess lower back issues are just super common. Like I hadn't really made the connection yet. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And some of the other staff there commented on that. And they're like, don't you think it's weird how like everyone who is struggling with addiction has lower back issues? And then when I was not in that job anymore and I went out and started working with just sort of the general population, I realized that actually not everyone has lower back issues, that it was actually mainly just that population. So I thought that was really kind of fascinating.
That is really fascinating. I've never specifically worked with like a group of people who struggle with addiction. I've had individual clients. But yeah, so the lower back, the lumbar spine, whenever I see that portion of it, the word that always comes in is stability, right? And if you're struggling with addiction, that is something that you just do not feel at a foundational level. It also, like the psoas muscles come around and connect into the lumbar spine. And as a muscle group, they help us bypass our pelvis, actually, like at the bone level. The pelvis is all generational ancestral lineage stuff. So whenever there's it's a whole combination. I'm not saying that everyone who struggles with addiction also has like lineage stuff, but there's a lot of trauma held in the pelvis. So whenever we're bypassing that and we're like attempting to find stability, but we can't, the muscles are pulling on the lower back. It's causing some stuff to happen there. Yeah.
Yeah. And most people that were there were struggling with like family patterns and generational trauma and things like that. So that fits. That makes sense. I want to talk a little bit about embodiment. What exactly is embodiment? When you talk about being embodied and embodiment, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. This is actually a really crucial question because everybody has a very, I feel like, specific answer. And if you ask this question to a lot of different embodiment practitioners, it will mean something slightly different. For me, it is really just the ability to be present in yourself, to feel your body. Like there's a very different aspect to being mentally present versus being physically present, right? To being able to feel what is in your body, to being able to feel the sensation, being able to feel the emotion, being able to feel what it is that is wanting to come up and move, what is wanting to be held. And even to a certain extent, being able to witness and listen, being able to be kind of like the kind and compassionate, caring person for ourselves. Because I very strongly believe the body is not just a vehicle for the soul. I believe the body is where the soul kind of connects and comes through and is able to then do work on the physical plane. So they're not two separate entities, So being embodied to me is being fully present with your spirit in a physical way.
I love it. So what kinds of things help you become more embodied, and what kinds of things do you see as getting in the way of becoming more embodied?
So yeah, I love the way you phrase that because it is I actually talk to clients a lot about this. It is a spectrum, right? We don't really move from like I'm disembodied to I'm embodied. It's not a switch that we flip and then all of a sudden I am here. To me, it's almost sort of like this graduated between like open and closed, right? We can always be more open. We can always be opening, or we can be closing. We can be becoming more embodied or becoming disembodied. And it's really, there are some overarching things, but it's also really personal as to what takes someone out of their body versus what brings someone back to their body. For me, touch brings me back to my body very, very quickly. For some people, it can be taste. For some people, it can be going out in nature. Some of those things, depending on your unique trauma history, depending on how you have been in a body, how your body has been treated, can be something that actually take you out of your body. So for people who have like sensory disorders, and I really don't like the term disorders, but for people who can be hypersensitive or something, touch is something that can make them want to jump out of their body. It can be really discomforting. And so that's part of what we journey with whenever we're talking about being in the realms of embodiment, because when we're working on things at a foundational level, we discover a lot of those cues and a lot of the things that feel like safety and a lot of the things that don't feel like safety, that make us want to detach, that make us want to disconnect. But, generally speaking, spending a lot of time on technology where you're putting your brain in a very specific state or in like kind of a prefrontal cortex hyper aroused state is going to take you out of your body. Another thing that I see frequently is people who have spent a lot of time trying to access, like within the spirituality world, like the astral plane, the upper realms, the transcendence, the ascending, will actually have a really hard time being in their body. And there will be areas that feel really numb or they can't connect to it. Sometimes like not even being able to kind of like land in their bones at all because they're kind of so up and out. And, we work with that just by kind of titrating the journey back down in, because the more you can integrate the experience and the sensation of being present and of being in your body, the more you can actually access, from those other planes. It's like it can drop in much easier. There's not a separation between the two. So yeah, that was a very
I think that's,
long-winded explanation.
what's that?
That was a very long-winded explanation.
No,
But
that was great. And I think that's why grounding is so important when we're doing any kind of psychic or intuitive work or sitting down to read tarot. If you're not grounded, it can be hard to, you might still get all the insights, but it's not going to make sense. You're not going to be able to relay it in a way that makes sense. So that's something that I learned like right in the beginning of my journey with like exploring intuition and psychic development. It's like that importance of being in your body and just like being really, really grounded. You said something about technology, and I want to talk about that a little bit because that is a topic that is I'm very passionate about that, because I've noticed over the years that technology seems to, the more I engage with technology, the less intuitive I feel and the less connected to myself I feel. And I feel like we're moving forward at this really quick pace with technology, where it's quickly becoming more and more and more and more ever present. And people have phones, so they always have like this piece of technology physically attached to them. And, you go out in public anywhere and like everyone's just staring at their phones. Like it's so weird. To me anyway. And so I guess I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Like, what is your relationship to technology like, given that you have this awareness that being really engaged with technology can kind of take you out of your body?
I mean, I'm fully human whenever it comes to that. I am just as susceptible to like, getting sucked into the scroll and then 30 minutes later being like, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? But I think that's a big part of it, is it always comes back to like, wait, why am I doing this? What am I trying to numb out from? What am I trying to not witness or not perceive? And I guess a preface to that before we even dive into technology is my experience with embodiment, my journey to embodiment is not because I was embodied my entire life. Like this is a journey I have had to go on. I had birth trauma whenever I was born, a near-death experience, like complex PTSD, which always made me feel like I was out of my body. Like I could play soccer, I could dance, but it was very much a feeling of learning the steps, not actually like doing the thing, not feeling it, not being fully present. It was extremely dissociated in that like I would just check out in the middle of a conversation. So whenever I find myself going to technology, that's the feeling that comes back. And having been so, like, we'll say, comfortable with that feeling for so long, I'm really quick to pick up on it. But for people who aren't used to kind of catching that, or being really aware, or even noticing what it is, it's kind of back to that spectrum where it's really easy to all of a sudden be all the way over here and be like, I am not present at all. And then it's the journey back, it's, you can't just snap the fingers and be like, oh, good, fully landed in my body again. There is a process to coming back, and it gets quicker and quicker and quicker. But it's still something that we need to be very mindful of. And I find technology to be just this really interesting thing that we have and we engage with, because it's a beautiful resource. It connects us to so many people. Like, I would not know you if we didn't have technology. We would not be teaching in tarot summer school if we didn't have technology. So in some ways, it's something that I have to be extremely grateful for, because it's really let me work the way I work, especially holding sessions over Zoom. But I also think that there's just this really sort of interesting and strange hive mind that we can click into with technology. Like, it almost feels like another dimension to me, but it's like, it just kind of exists and you can click into it. And when you do, it's like, that's where you are. You're not here. You're there. You're kind of embedded and interwoven into that space, which just takes you out of your physical space, your physical body, and the life that you're in.
Yeah, I like how you put that. That makes sense. And I've noticed, like, if I go on vacation, I never take like, I don't take any tablets or anything like that with me usually. Usually I'll go camping or something like that. And just being offline for like just 2 or 3 days, like, it makes I feel my mind and everything, just like the pace of my energy just like slowing down to like a really calm place. And I feel like when I'm in that calm place, when I am more kind of centered in myself, you have a different perspective on things and you experience things differently, you see things differently. And when you're in that online space, I feel like you're more quick to react and there's like less consciousness or something. Do you find that as well?
Yes. I mean, part of that is really simply just the part of the brain state that gets activated whenever you're online and scrolling. It puts you into like a shallow breathing predatory nature, which I think is why we also see like so much aggression and trolling and like bullying and stuff come out in that space. And I also know that I would not be nearly as aware and compassionate with what's going on in the world if I didn't have access to like news articles. And I don't get my news on social media. I've actually found that to be really triggering for me because of like the way it's posted and the way it's often presented. But that's also a big part of it, is because everyone posts with energy, like especially if we're talking about technology in terms of social media. When you post with a certain energy, it doesn't really matter what the intention is. It doesn't matter if you're just trying to like bring awareness to something. If you're like triggered when you're posting, if you're doing anything like that, that's the energy somebody else is also getting from it. So it's also then activating like the nervous system, and it's activating like more of a triggered sense or a fawning response or a fight or flight. And so there's almost no way to like neutrally engage because hardly anything is neutrally posted, so you don't have that space. And to be able to be like, whoo, I'm gonna put this down and I'm gonna take some space, takes a lot because you are disconnecting. And I have the same experience when we moved here almost a year ago. So last October, I did all of the painting inside of our house. And so I was up on ladders and it was just like painting white on white primer. And it was like the most boring job ever. but I had to be really focused to make sure that I was actually covering everything because it's white on white.
Mhm.
And that was the most tuned into my body, tuned into my intuition. Like the information was coming in, the guidance was coming in. I didn't have internet out here yet. We moved in and didn't have internet for 3 months. So, and there's no cell service where I live. So it was this really beautiful space of being like, wow. And I don't have to do anything with this. I don't have to get guidance and like post it. I don't have to, like, it took all the pressure off. I could have a response and just let it be a response. I could feel a feeling. It was just a feeling, it was this really, I mean, it's not something I even get on vacation because it was prolonged. So like I get a taste of it, for like 3 days or like a week on vacation, but having those forced 3 months of just like complete internet sabbatical basically was beautiful. And I keep telling myself I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to put this down. I'm going to go into that space again. But with it being available, it's really hard to kind of set the parameters around that.
So you're someone who has an online business and you do most, if not all of your work online. So what kind of parameters do you set up for that so that you're not always looking at a screen and checking email and and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's actually the like biggest surefire way for me to start burning out is to always be available. And actually I think I posted something just maybe last month that was even putting stricter boundaries around Instagram and when I will respond to DMs and what I will engage with and like the kind of question that is okay versus not okay, like what do we need to have a session for and what will I answer for you, like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I answer email pretty much twice a day, first thing in the morning, and then before I shut my laptop and kind of log off for the day. And really the same with DMs. I make sure I'm in there 1 time per day.
Mhm.
If I find myself in my DMs, I kind of make a mental note and I'm like, well, this is it. I'm here. Answer everything that I can answer while I'm here. And
Yeah.
then we're closing it down. And it took a long time to be okay with ignoring like the little notifications that pop up, like you get the little like 45 sitting on this like corner of something and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to do that.
Yeah.
But I think it also helps us kind of step back from the culture of immediacy.
Mhm.
Like it's cool to wait for a day. Like it's okay.
Yeah, I know. The
Both of
world
us,
isn't going to collapse if you don't respond to a direct message within 20 minutes or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's shift to the topic of tarot because you are a tarot summer school teacher this year and you have a course on embodying the minor arcana. Can you tell me a little bit about what your course is about and what kind of inspired you to create it?
Yeah. So it was actually just the very first thing that dropped in whenever Anthony was like, would you like to teach? And I was like, I sure would. here's what I want to talk about. Because there is this really, really cool overlap to me between the minor arcana in the tarot and the bones. Because while the bones each have their own meaning per se, they have a specific energy that they hold at a specific bone. There's also a really cool way that energy moves through them. And that is sort of like the alchemical principles, right? If we move from like air to fire to water to earth, and we kind of go around the cycle. The same thing happens in the bones. Most of them are water bones. Most of them are filtering or flowing. Most of them are moving energy all the time. But then we have specific bones that are earth bones that are really like storing and holding and helping us compost and helping us like nurture our growth if we can access that. We have fire bones that are helping us to transmute the stuff that's being brought in. And then we have air, and this is always awkward because it's joints. It's not really air bones. that's helping us with the alignment, with the micro adjustments. So like as the water's kind of flowing through, say like the left arm here, everything's flowing up and through. It's flowing through a ton of joints in the fingers, all of the tiny like bones in the wrists, the carpals. It's flowing through and it's hitting the elbow up into the shoulder before it comes in. And at each of those places, the air element is kind of setting up this really cool equation and being like, yes or no, in alignment or not in alignment. And it's helping us to filter things out. And if you look at those archetypes and you look at the tarot, right, we have the exact same archetypes in the minor arcana. And they're looking at, you know, emotionally with cups, what is flowing? What is it that's kind of being nourished in this space with air? What is it that we're needing to cut out or align with, or where we're needing to be decisive, you know? So it's kind of asking these same questions in the tarot as our bones and our foundational energies asking in the body. And when we put those two things together, it can help us remember what these 54 cards are actually speaking to. You know, whenever you have a feeling and a resonance with a card, it's very different than just having a knowingness of the card. The emotional memory hits different. And creating this was also very personal for me because having read tons of tarot books and worked with, well, I will say multiple decks, not like an extravagant number of decks, I still found that I was forgetting all the time. And I would pull a card and it would be like, what is that? And I'd look it up again and I'd read it again. And I was getting really down on myself because I was like, why can't I remember what this card is telling me, what this card is supposed to be? And so when I put those things together and I realized that if I can feel the energy of the card, I can bring that feeling up again whenever it comes out in a reading. And so I don't so much even look at the artwork anymore as I just remember what it is that it feels like. And that's what I'm trying to help people learn in this course, you know, for the people that have beaten their head against the wall or like go back to the book all the time, or even just want a different way to engage with it. You know, feeling the Ace of Wands is very different than looking at the imagery of like the hand through the cloud with the wand, you know, that because you feel the uplift, you feel the rising energy. Yeah, so that's why I don't know if you've been in there or not, but I created journeys for each of the suits. So there is like a meditative journey through wands, a meditative journey through pentacles. And I only do ace through 10. I don't do the court cards in those journeys, but it's me talking you through the feeling, taking you deep into the feeling of that card. And then there's space in a PDF to like journal on it. What came up? What did it feel like? Where did you feel that in your body? Like, did it bring up a memory? And it's letting those things connect together, letting the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, the imagery come together. So whenever you have the card, it immediately comes to mind. It's like anchoring it in a deeper part of the brain.
I love that because that's kind of similar a little bit to what I teach in my courses. I really encourage people to really get like acquainted with the 4 suits and to make it personal, right? Like really feel into those cards, feel into those suits, and see how those cards reflect your real life, your day-to-day life. Because I think once we make something personal, like you said, it's easy to remember. You know, it's not like the tarot is something over here. It becomes a part of you and you start to engage with it that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's archetypal for a reason, you know, there are things that we all engage with. So when
Yeah.
you connect that feeling and your own engagement to like the artwork of the card, or the meaning of the card, it's there. Yeah.
So how did you discover tarot?
Oh goodness. I can't even remember how many years ago it was. It was just like an inner pool. So I grew up very Catholic. I went to Catholic school. And then, not that I feel like you have to separate yourself from Catholicism or religion to be into tarot, but for me, it was like in the stepping away and the moving into like the more like spirituality and really even animism and like other ways of communicating with a higher being, another power, the universe, that I started to like, that it even started to come into my awareness, I guess, because, it's just something that you see in the spirituality space as a tool, as something that can be really helpful in your journey. And at the time, I had no intention of like diving in and learning all the cards, or learning, what the major arcana was, or like what each of the cards meant there, that, the wheel, the cycle that they take you on. And actually, my very first deck was the Wooden Tarot, which is not a good beginner deck. It's really hard to read as a beginner. There was no guidebook. But since I was working in the bones, I was like, I'm going to get a tarot deck that has bones on it. And like, I tried and I tried and I tried and it didn't work. So I finally got Modern Witches Tarot. And that one was the one that I started learning with and working with and really feeling into, because it is, very similar to some of the like original artwork, original symbolism, like the facial expressions, all that kind of stuff.
No, I just want to stop you. Did you say the Modern Witch Tarot?
Mm-hmm.
I think I have that one. Yeah. I love that one. It's really similar to the Rider-Waite deck in a lot of ways. Yeah, I really like that deck, actually. It's really neat.
Yeah. So, the gender binary is played with, you have more diversity in like skin color and body type and image, but it is really similar to the original Rider-Waite imagery, which, just helps whenever you're kind of learning more of like the technicalities and what to look for in the card and stuff like that. But yeah, that was probably, I don't know, a decade ago.
Okay. I thought the Modern Witch Tarot was like a really new deck. Am I wrong on that?
No, I didn't have that one a decade
Oh,
ago.
okay.
That one came in later whenever I really wanted to start learning it. But when I first started working with tarot was probably a decade ago. Yeah.
So how do you work with tarot now in your kind of regular day-to-day life?
I'm more of a pick it up whenever it's calling me kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a specific ritual that I do every day, or like with new moons or full moons. I will often pull for like an altar space and I'll work with a card for a while, in like a specific capacity. If I'm really kind of going through a moment of like upheaval or something feels like it's changing, I'll draw more cards, or I'll kind of work with a spread that feels like it's calling me. But it's not something that I ever really put rules around for myself, because as soon as I do that, then like I don't know if it's the Aquarian part of me or what, but I like rebel against them. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that now. So I've always needed tarot to be something that can just be there when I need it and be like supportive, rather than something that I need to do all the time. It's never been anything I've been interested in like reading for other people. It's always been extremely personal for me.
Yeah, I'm similar in that I usually pick up the tarot when it calls to me. I know when I first discovered tarot, I was like always doing readings every day. I was doing the daily one card draw. I was always writing about tarot. But then, as time went on, it became less and less frequent. And so I'm kind of the same. I just wait until the mood strikes, until I really wanted to do a reading. And I find that the more experience and more understanding I have of tarot, the less I want to do readings. Like I may only do, a handful of readings for myself a year, as opposed to, in the beginning, every day I was reading, and now I feel like it's like less is more, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about your new Oracle card deck.
Yeah. So this is, it's actually really fun because it kind of bridges the two worlds, right? Like, another reason that I actually love tarot is because like I said before, I'm a touch person. So the tactile quality of having a card and being able to work with like one archetype or one thing at a time is super appealing. Like, it just works very well for me. And I think given the popularity of it, At least, especially currently, it works really well for a lot of people. And so whenever I started getting requests to teach what I know about the bones, I tried a couple different formats. I taught a longer format course, I taught a shorter format course, and nothing felt right, nothing really landed. And then it, just kind of came in to turn it into an oracle deck where I could break down the bones and the symbolism and like the archetypes of what is held there in a way that is really accessible. So there's actually a very extensive guidebook that comes with it. So it's because it is something different. The guidebook is a lot of the stuff that I used to teach in the courses kind of distilled into book format. So there's information in there that touches on the alchemy of the bones, so the earth, the water, the fire, the air, not nearly as in depth as the tarot summer school course, but it's in the guidebook in an introductory way. Talk about communicating with your bones and how to really come into a space of embodiment where you can do that, like a conversation, basically a format for that. There's spreads for really how to use the deck, and then there's really large 2-page spread for each of the cards where I talk about the energy in the card. So this is how the energy flows. I talk about the wisdom and like, this is what the bone is bringing up. And then we also talk a little bit about like the anatomy and keywords and what it's like when it's in balance and what it's like when it's out of balance. But so I can just kind of pull one up here. I have it sitting in front of me, but that's the card for the occipital bone.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah.
the keyword for that one is dreaming. And partly because that is where, we have our kind of our subconscious brain back here in the very back, but it's also the bone that holds a lot of our potential for stepping through that kind of like dream portal, whether we're doing it at night, whether we're daydreaming during the day. It's kind of a place where we can receive a lot of information in that bone, and we want to work with it and allow it to be as freed up as possible versus, like repressing them. So the card invites you to kind of step into what it is that you're dreaming, what it is that's coming through to you. Another one, that's the card for belonging, which sacrum, it sits right in the middle of both sides of the pelvis and is, a bone that sits below the lumbar spine, right in the lower back. And this is where like our lineage energies come together and kind of come into the central energy column, and where our bones can also say like, yes, that belongs. Yes, that belongs. That does not belong, like where we can kind of almost like have that choice into what I'm going to take on and what aligns with me and what I'm not going to take on from my family. So the cards really break down the imagery of the bones, but in a way that you don't have to know anatomy, or you don't have to be able to tune into it on your own. It's very much like flipping a normal oracle card that just brings up a word for you to meditate on, or a word that kind of unlocks a little piece of what it is that you're already, sitting with or working with.
I love that it's such a unique concept with the bones. Like, I don't know if there's any other decks that emphasize that. So I think that's really, really neat. What was it like creating your own deck?
It was probably also the best and also like most intense experience, like the highest high, the lowest low. It's kind of this process that takes you through all of it. And I will say for a moment, so there are the Memento Mori decks out there that are like skeleton imagery based, but they don't really go into like meaning of skeleton. They're a little different, but yeah. So gosh, it was a long process for me between deciding that I wanted to put this into a deck format and sketching the concepts, and then also knowing that if I was in charge of doing the final art, it would never come into this world because I would be way too perfectionist with what it looked like and judgmental about it. So I have a woman I went to undergrad with who went and did scientific illustration in grad work, and I contacted her, and she took all of my collages and did like a digital painting in Procreate. So for 3 years, we've had this really beautiful back and forth relationship where I would sketch a new card, I would send it to her, she would work with it for a bit, send it back, I would edit it, then she would get it. So it's just kind of been this really fun flow. But I worked on the cards for 3 years before I even started writing the book. And that was the last piece. And that was probably the hardest piece to birth, to get the words that felt right, to get like the clarity and be succinct about it and have it be, like, I don't want to say the right message, but almost like the correct message. Because when I first started creating the deck, the art actually looked very different. Because whenever people were coming to me and I was seeing the bones, I was seeing them in a very detrimental state. We were working with things that needed to be released, that needed to be integrated, that needed to be transmuted. And so the original words that came with a lot of these cards and the original art was more in the shadow aspect of the bone. And so I scrapped probably 12 cards and started them all over again, because I was like, that's not the focus. That's not what we want to be sitting with and working with here. So I kind of restarted quite a few of them and brought them into what is the light aspect of the bone. Well, I won't even say what is the light, what is the neutral aspect of the bone? And then in the guidebook, we talk about what does it feel like whenever it's really in balance, and what does it feel like when it's out of balance. So the information's there, but it's not the focus.
Nice.
So when you're getting the card, it really is sort of like in a really balanced, aligned, neutral state. This is what this bone does.
Nice. And so your deck is coming out pretty soon, right?
So it's available for pre-order right now. I should have half of them in my hands on Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Okay.
So August 30th or 31st, they should show up at my doorstep. And then there's another shipment of them coming that are going to be here probably in like September or October.
And so where can people order? Through your website?
Yeah. So you can go to ashleystinson.com/oracle. And there is a web page there, and there's a space where you can actually click through the cards. And there's, like a little kind of snapshot of what it means, or like a little piece of guidance underneath of each of them. So you can get a feel for what they feel like, and the messages that is behind them, and the artwork and all of that. And then you can also access the web page just through my Instagram, which is @the Ashley Stinson. There's a link in the bio.
Nice. So where can people find you? I mean, you've said your website, you're on Instagram. Is there any other socials or anything like that that you're on?
So Instagram is the main one, and I even have a bit of a tenuous relationship with it. As per our technology discussion earlier. But I'm also working on setting up a lot more of a presence on Insight Timer.
On what?
So on Insight Timer, which is the meditation app.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have been putting up, I think there's 2 of them right now. They're just like they're not very short, 7 to 10 minute embodied meditations. One of them helps you to really kind of release the stress response in the bone. The other one is for sort of like resetting the energy, like before bed, basically, to help you get rid of what it is that you may have picked up, or that may kind of be like not settling quite right from the day, to help release a lot of that before you go to sleep. But I have a bunch of meditations that I want to be putting up there. So Insight Timer is kind of going to be the experiential place where you can meditate with me, and it's free, which I love about it. Or on Instagram, it's more of like the teaching space where I talk about the things and I explain the stuff. So kind of 2 different purposes, but fun ways to interact.
Nice. So I read something on your site that I thought was a really interesting quote. And so I want to ask you about it. So the quote was, we each have a part to play in creating the new world. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, so this goes a little bit deeper into the realms of embodiment, where not everybody is embodied the same way, right? There's kind of this, not really stereotype, maybe expectation is the best word, that I think whenever we talk about embodiment, we expect it to be the same for everyone. We expect everyone to kind of like feel the same in their body. Like there is a, I don't know, ideal. And the thing is, it's really, like everything else, very personal. So something that the realms of embodiment helps us do is understand, do I feel most embodied in my bones? Like, is this the place I inhabit deepest in my body? Do I feel most embodied? And do I want to work more like in the muscle realm, which is more about connection and attachment and relationship? Do I feel most embodied in the fluid realm, which is flow and balance? Or in the organ realm, which is more about trust and trusting that each piece is going to play its part. So not only within yourself, but also outside of yourself, trusting that you're going to take care of your piece and I'm going to take care of my piece. And this person over here is going to take care of their piece. And so that's really what it comes down to for me, is I don't expect anyone to kind of show up in their body in the same way. I don't, especially if we're dealing with extremely 3D things like chronic pain or chronic illness, or systemic things that have really caused us to have a very different relationship with our body and feeling towards it. So the way we show up in our body, where we feel most comfortable, also gives us a lot of clues about what part are we playing, like as we're moving through the world in hopefully a different way, a more aware way, a way that is wanting to kind of shepherd and steward equity and justice and right relationship with people, with the earth, with everything that we touch. How do I do that? Do I do that in a foundational way in the bones? Do I do that in more of like, not really the opposite, but kind of the other end of the spectrum is like through the DNA in like a quantum way. So that was a very roundabout way of saying that basically I don't expect anyone to kind of have like the same results. I don't expect sessions to ever be the same. I don't expect people to have like the same goals or dreams or even opinions. But I do believe that if we're all kind of engaging with it in a way that is true and honest, like in our body, that we're going to play the part that we're meant to play.
Right. I love that. That's beautiful. Ashley, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I feel like I've learned so much from you just about the body, energy, our bones. I could talk to you for hours on end. So thank you so much for chatting with me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This was really, really fun. And I loved getting to have this conversation.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to put all your links to your Tarot Summer School course. And I believe that there's not very much time left for people to sign up for your course, just like a few days. I'm gonna upload this interview today, and then I think there's only going to be like a few more days where people can sign up. And I'll put all the links to like your website and your Instagram and all that just below this video if people want to check out your work. So thank you again, Ashley. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. Likewise.